Anyway, so today we're lucky enough to have Jen Evans join us. I want to give a little bit of background in regards to Jen. Jen actually, when you start reading her resume, is kind of one of those ones you sit back and like, wow, this is quite the resume of when you first started to where you are now. Jen actually was with Bed Bath & Beyond for quite some time. And probably the most impressive part of it was when Bed Bath & Beyond went from brick and mortar to switch to a more of an online presence. Jen literally steered the ship in the right direction, kept it was a 90% like retention rate, which is absolutely nuts if you ask me. A lot of times people will start bouncing off once they kind of see, things going in a different direction than what they're used to. But Jen, you really seem to keep the ship in the right way. So in addition to that, Jen also does a ton of charity and is involved with a whole bunch of different benefits and whatnot. Honestly, Jen, happy to have you on there. I'd love for you to kind of tell a little bit about yourself and kind of go from there.
Sure. So as you mentioned, Chris, first of all, thank you for having me. Absolutely. Thank you for having me as well, Alicia. I may join your quest in figuring out the name of your new podcast. I've got some ideas germinating as a brand marketer always does.
Yes.
Many of which would be terrible ideas. Maybe one will stick. We'll talk later.
Okay.
But as you mentioned, yes, I spent the last 10 years or so working on the Bed Bath & Beyond brand in multiple iterations with the original organization as it transformed into an omni retailer. And then more recently, when the company was acquired by the company formerly known as Overstock and worked through the brand transition. Point of clarity, the 90% is actually brand awareness. I wish it was customer retention, but certainly a key part of keeping customers engaged. More recently than that, I have been doing a number of consulting projects for one large multi-billion-dollar retailer, a smaller independent creative agency. So really having a good time kind of just rolling up my sleeves and helping them continue to rebuild their businesses. Prior to that, spent 20 years in the dynamic world of media as publishing was transforming from print only into something that looks like a multi-channel digital print content hub. Had a world of fun there, but certainly learned a lot in the process. So now having the opportunity to have this conversation with you and really think about where we're going next is always interesting and dynamic. They say that the only thing constant is change, and I've certainly lived that throughout my career.
Yeah, I hate that the truth.
I know that's a great quote. The only thing normal is change. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And kind of just like your journey of where you started to kind of where you are right now. And I love how you're also branching into the consulting space. Do you find that the experiences that you have really built in these very large organizations, how has that helped you from a consulting standpoint with maybe smaller brands or kind of, entrepreneurial endeavors?
Sure. So I think that there's a number of things that have worked really, really well. By and large, although I have been very fortunate to work for a number of Fortune 500 companies, that's been the hallmark of my career, they were always in very entrepreneurial roles. So we were always scrappy. We were scrappy with our resources. We were scrappy as we continued to transform the business and our own organizations, and remaining flexible. The word pivot has come up far too often, right. Much more than I would like to admit. But I think that those skills are really, really critical regardless of the size of the organization. So that has been a key component. The other thing is I'm testing different parts of my brain right now, which is really nice. I'm applying principles and practices that I have learned and honed over the years. And there are some very core things that, regardless of the size of the business, are critical. Cross-functional collaboration is absolutely essential and is something that most organizations, I think, really struggle with. Yeah. I hosted a panel about a month and a half ago at a really wonderful conference that was with marketing professionals. And we talked a lot about leading through change. And there are so many organizations that have never really gone through the amount of change that is coming and that is here now. And I think really enabling teams and listening to them and understanding where their team members are so you can meet them there is really, really critical. And not change for the sake of change, certainly, but by the same token, if you don't have that flexibility, something will come at you and you won't know how to handle it, and your team won't know how to handle it. Right. So even just having that skill set, I think, is critical regardless of the size of business.
Yeah, especially in the marketing atmosphere, right? It always seems like once you learn a new trait, next thing you know, it's going to change to something else, So you really kind of got to be on your toes and really aware of kind of what's going on. I love the point that you mentioned in regards to really kind of listening to your team members. That was one thing that I've learned over my career, is that it doesn't matter where you're at, whether you're, the low man on the totem pole or the guy at the top. Like, everybody has ideas, and when they bring them to the table, you never know who's going to be the one that really kind of hits the nail on the head. And I think those individuals that don't pay attention and listen to everybody, I think they truly are missing out on great ideas.
Disadvantage.
Yeah, huge disadvantage.
I don't know if you watch Masterclass.
Yes.
So I'm obsessed with Master. You would like it because it's like short little blips. But they have a CIA episode, and one of the things that they had said was, at their meetings, they never let the senior leaders jump into the brainstorming or the solutions conversation first. They always let the, not interns, but like the juniors present their ideas of what the solution could be in an issue, because they do not want them to be afraid of what the seniors are thinking or doing, or the leaders. And they also don't want the leaders to only listen to each other. So they always lead the meetings with a junior sharing the solution. And I thought that was so fascinating, of like, ideas can come from the intern, can come from the first year associate, or it can come from the CEO. But when you bring that openness to a conversation, amazing things happen, right? Like that collaboration, what you're talking about, is so missed among organizations.
It's so interesting you bring that up. I just had a conversation last week with one of the organizations that I'm consulting with, and they're struggling with the loudest voice in the room is always the more senior people, because the junior people are deferring to them. Right. And we had this whole discussion around a former colleague of mine shared this with me from an organization she had come from. Their principle was empowering the most junior person to make the decision. And I thought that was a really interesting dynamic. I think, and I've struggled with this throughout my career too, where people will say, well, we've got to see what Jen says first. Right. Well, Jen's going to ultimately decide. And I purposefully will sometimes not be in meetings, so the team can come up with that solution and recommendations. Certainly that comes with making sure that they have the right intent in the discussion, and that, for lack of a better word, the brief is right in the beginning, so everyone's aligned to the cause. But then let people ideate, let people be empowered to bring solutions to the table. And it's going to sit somewhere in the middle of that, absolutely. But I love your point, Alicia, about making sure that you sit back, making sure that you empower people and you trust people to be creative with their problem solving. Right. I think it's really important as a leader.
And it's something that you don't learn. Like we were talking about this with somebody about like, what do you learn in school, or what was your degree? And I'm like, well, the majority of all this stuff I learned was just in real life situations of somebody came to me with an idea and I may have jumped at it. I'd be like, no, like I probably do this to Chris all the time. Like, no, that's a terrible idea. Rather than stopping and being like, okay, but how do you see that playing out? Like, how could that actually solve the problem? And like lean into that solution. So somebody's going to bring you a problem. What's the solution that they have, whether it's good or bad or whatnot? So I think as a leader, you have to learn that. That's not something that you just have.
I think that's absolutely true. And I think a lot of leaders are very ambitious. So they want to go in and help solve, and they want to make sure that either we're going to get to a better outcome, or they don't want their teams to fail. There could be the right intent there, but it does take a lot of practice and discipline to take a step back and pause. I've certainly learned that through my career as well.
Yeah.
I also think it's really, really important for you to trust the people that you hire, right? So a lot of times when you have individuals that are in, let's just call it the weeds, right? So they're the ones that are literally every single day working on it. A lot of times I feel like they have a better idea than what the upper management does, specifically because upper management, that's not their job. It's to see the bigger picture of what's going on. And you have those individuals that are focusing on, the smaller pieces of it. So those are the ones that are really kind of seeing what's working, what's not working, the effects that it has on them. And I really do think it's important to kind of just take a step back and listen to it. I know in a previous life, I was a manager, it sometimes can be very difficult not to micromanage, but when you have that ability to really kind of step back and just kind of listen to what people are saying, and look, there are people going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. Like everybody does it. So it's one of those things to kind of say, okay, like we made the mistake, we learned from it, but what did we learn? Right. And a lot of times that's where those aha moments kind of come into play.
Yeah. Chris, I think you're absolutely right. And I think hiring with intention is really important too. Finding people that have different skill sets that you do.
100%.
I think you need to have a level of confidence to be able to do that, to not feel like you're admitting maybe your gaps. But by the same token, we all have strengths and weaknesses. We all have opportunities, right? So I think being really intentional with the mix of the team, because those diverse perspectives will become that much more important.
Yeah. I think you bring up a great point. I think it's important that you're uncomfortable with saying, or I should say, you're comfortable with basically saying that you're uncomfortable, that you don't know something, right? It's okay. Like, I don't even know a fraction of what Alicia does, but what I do know, it's a different trait than what Alicia does, right? So a lot of times it complements each other. So it's really kind of important to really embrace those specialties that people have.
I'm curious too. So, leading these really large organizations and managing multiple different personalities and skill sets. I have so many questions around that, but how did you remain the visionary, right? Because you essentially weren't in the weeds, hitting publish on certain pieces, but you had to remain we're doing this for the strategic direction, and then kind of also managing those that were the implementators.
Yeah, I think it goes back a little bit to cross-functional collaboration and communication and constant for both of those things. So you can't do something once and expect that action to all of a sudden transform the way an organization operates, right? It needs to be consistent. So anytime I join an organization, anytime a new team member starts, whether it's my team member or someone that has some connectivity to the role or the function, I get to know them as people. What makes them tick? What motivates them, both personally and professionally? I can only be as good of a leader as the connections that I create with the team. Yeah. So I think having that base of trust at the beginning, and especially as Gen Z continues to gain more share in our professional and frankly, consumer lives, that level of authenticity is absolutely critical. Yeah. So starting first as a person, I think is really, really important. The vision then comes if you are able to create that connectivity and that cross-functional collaboration, because you're basing it off of relationships that started from a place of trust. So then you have the ability to take a little bit of a step back, let go some of those reins, and make sure that alignment exists throughout all of those different functions and all of those team members to be able to then continue to execute and grow.
Right. And you mentioned the next generation too, being in that consumer space. Where do you see the marketing trends going for brands, both in the B2B and B2C space, with a whole new chapter of consumers, essentially?
Yeah, I think there are so many different dynamics at play right now. So the conference that I mentioned before, the two key things that everybody was talking about, you can probably say them with me, are AI and social.
Yeah, yeah, right. I think 90% of content in 3 years will be all AI created, right? Which is wild,
right? And I think AI for the sake of AI, is not a thing, right? Where I think it becomes really, really interesting is the ecosystem and how AI can help support or potentially drive. Does it drive testing? Does it drive insights? Does it drive different types of journey mapping that then you can apply your internal data and insights to be able to create new marketing models and new customer journeys? I think wow, not very authentic.
I think that is authentic, right?
Actually, it's crazy authentic. Is incredibly important. And there was, as I was prepping for this and obviously just kind of reading voraciously as I like to do, I came across a study that BCG published a couple of months ago about how the traditional marketing funnel is on its head. So there's been a lot of buzz about this in the last couple of years, right? And obviously the idea of awareness, consideration, action, or any version of the funnel will remain. What's different is the way that the customer is consuming media, not surprisingly. And they've sort of broken it down into 4 key stages: stream, scroll, search, and shop.
Huh. I love
Gen Z is, right? Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Gen Z is a digitally native generation. This is not going to be a change for them. This is how they are growing up. I have 2 Gen Zers in my home. I see it every single day. They are consuming media in a completely different way. I think the reason why I bring this up isn't to say that we should just be focusing on one part of it. We have to focus on all of it and understand that every consumer is going through that journey map in their own way. Yeah. So I think one-to-one marketing is incredibly important. Using AI to be able to help us test and learn through those journey maps is incredibly important. I think as we talk about social planning for influence and being able to understand that we authentically, and these themes are all kind of weaving into each other because that's the world we're living in, that authenticity and making sure that those connections with consumers are really, really authentic, understanding not every organization can be an expert in everything. Right. So partnership marketing is really, really important and continues to grow in importance. Influencers, really, really important as long as they're authentic to that experience. And then understanding that every customer is going through that journey differently. You need to be everywhere. And then you need to understand how the interconnectivity plays differently depending on who you are as a customer. So there are so many different dynamics happening right now. I don't think anything in the past is going away. And this goes a little bit to what we talked about before. I think it's a build.
Yeah, this is another layer.
There's an evolution. Right. But just like everything.
The stuff.
Exactly. Just like technology, the speed continues to increase. So certainly can't predict what's coming next other than change. Yeah. But I think foundationally, those companies that are understanding and embracing AI, the tools that make sense for them, I realize there's a lot of legalities and there's a lot of comfort and trust that has to go with that, but embedding that into the culture to be able to drive some of these other things, I think is going to become increasingly more important really, really quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you bring up some like interesting points of that. I mean, I've heard the funnel is now flipped on its side. I've heard it's upside down. And I mean, if brands just take a step back and be like, how do I as a consumer, like we're all consumers, how do I purchase? What influences my purchase decision? And these smaller businesses, when at least they first started, it was back in 2008. And I remember never wanting to like be just the face. It was, we have to be bigger than what we are in order to grow. And brands were doing that. And then it started to switch into like, no, the personal brands are the ones that actually are gaining great relationships and long-term clients. And these large brands are trying to act small and put a face behind their marketing, right? Like, I don't know the exact stat, but those that actually show the CEO's face or whatnot get a higher traction of opens. And so we see this huge switch, even just in the last 2 decades of how people are purchasing. And I want to say in the last like 2 to 3 years, I'm not on social media for my personal enjoyment. I like to fly under the radar, but I had to be pushed into, you have to get your photos out there. You have to get your videos out there. You have to share the story that we're brother, sister. We never talked about that at all. Not because we were avoiding it, just because I don't know, we didn't think it was relevant, but that storyline is so important. So how are these larger brands showing that story when it isn't one person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd like to touch on something before I start to answer the question that I think is really, really interesting. There's a saying in Gen Z, you may be aware of it, touch grass. And I think that's the underlying theme of all of this, right? They live in such a digitized world. They're in front of screens and consuming content constantly. They're using their phones in school. They're using AI in English class, right? So this digitally native world is it's something that we, even in our generations, can't even begin to fathom but how different it is, I think. And I think that idea of touching grass is what you're leaning into right here. They want to know that behind your organization are people, people that have stories, people that they can connect to. The digitization is doing so many amazing things, but at the end of the day, they want to feel connected. It's interesting, in retail, there's a lot of conversations around experiential right now. Right. And how did they create an experience that makes someone want to go into a physical location, right? So they may end up shopping online, and this goes a little bit back to the study that I mentioned, but it's all part of the decisioning that customers have now. They're taking all of these things in and trying to figure out ultimately where they're going to make their purchase decisions. And it's a fairly, and I know I keep talking about Gen Z, but the practical reality is, as we continue to go 5-10 years, that will be where the spending is. And they're a very, very large population. They're akin to boomers. So, we have to pay attention. But I think what's really, really interesting is the companies that are understanding that they have to create, again, these authentic connections are really, really critical. I was just reading an article about Starbucks, and Starbucks has lost its way.
Yeah.
They're admittedly saying they're trying to get people back in, and there could be a lot of things behind it. There's a lot about proliferation of SKUs and the fact that they just had too many different things. The amount of locations obviously is a huge part. The economics of it, it's not cheap, is really, really important. But they've just recently introduced a campaign called Sit and Stay.
Okay.
And they're leaning back to their roots. This idea about saying we're creating a community within our coffee shops is what's really behind this, and it's having an absolutely huge impact on the business. But what they did, which I thought was really, really interesting, what the core tenet is they're using ceramic coffee mugs. They're using glassware.
Yeah.
They're playing into the things that are important to this generation or these generations, I say, right? So they're taking insights, they're taking motivations, and then they're using that as an undercurrent. And it feels authentic, obviously, because if you want to have this sort of coffee house community feel,
there it is.
That's the way to do it.
And all the 90s.
Long-winded answer. I'm not sure I answered the question.
No. I love that because if you even walk into a store, all the fashion is going back to the 90s. And when you're saying like the ceramic mugs, it's like that was Friends, right? Like they took a break from life and they sat on a couch and they drank coffee mugs. Prior to COVID, like when we first started Elise Day, I would just go to different coffee shops every day, and it would be my office for the day, and I could leave my computer there and like go order more coffee and come back, and people knew who I was. And now that whole shift is like nobody sits in there anymore. Everyone's running in, grabbing their order and going. So that community part it's so funny. We were so excited to go away from that, and now everyone is, I want the couch and the cool looking mugs.
Interesting, like the whole, like it almost comes full circle. Like I was actually talking to one of my buddies in regards to, I'm at the cars, and he was saying that one of the big pushes now is that people are now looking more for the, not the digital, but the analog speedometers, right? And so it's just like people are starting to come back to what things originally were, right? Almost like to what people were used to. Like I love kind of hearing that people are going back to, using the coffee mugs. As small as that seems, like sometimes it is just that little thing that gives it that authentic feel, of home, I guess you could say, I also just kind of want to touch on real quick in regards to trust, right? So I think you mentioned before in regards to, it's really important that your clients or your potential customers trust you, right? So if you have this atmosphere that is something that feels like home, it's more comfortable, more reliable, that's kind of what they're going to attend to, honestly, I think I
think you're absolutely right. And that could be a holdover from COVID to some extent, right? I mean, it's been 5 years this month, which is wild, right? And I think we're creating a little bit, and I don't want to use the word balance because everything's unbalanced, but about a balance between what COVID was like, which obviously was all about home, going back into the world, and now we've sort of created a let's call it a new normal, where when there is authentic experiences where you can feel comfortable. I think you're absolutely right, Chris. I think that could definitely be a pull through.
Yeah. The other thing I think too is like, I think people buy people, right? So like if you can build that trust, like that's what happens. It's interesting. You mentioned, me and you being brother and sister.
I'm laughing. Buy from people, do not buy people.
That's true, right?
Yeah.
But when it kind of comes to us, like for the longest time, we kept it in that we were brother and sister. And it just so happened that one of our clients, just to tell a quick little funny story, we were in a restaurant and me just being comfortable, I ended up putting my hand on the back of Alicia's chair, and you could see the customer was kind of like, what's going on? Like,
Yeah,
like what's the relationship? And then they stop the conversation and they're like, do you guys like, married? And I was like, no, we're brother and sister. And it was very interesting to kind of see the second that they realized that we were brother and sister, it changed the whole dynamic, right? They wanted to be, I don't want to say almost part of the family, but it made all sense. So now we tell all of our customers and every single one of them, like, I don't want to say they light up, but they laugh, they light up. And then of course they ask the questions, how do you work with your brother? How do you work with your sister? So, but it's interesting because that's the story that we're trying to portray now is like, look, this is who we are. Welcome to the family, it kind of jump right in. And because we're like that, we usually see a lot of our clients and potential customers have that reaction of like, oh, wow, like I kind of want to work with you guys.
Or even family.
Yeah, well, there's a point of, I'm sorry.
No, go, all you.
I was just going to say, it's a point of differentiation for you.
Yes.
So to be able to celebrate that, I think is a really wonderful thing.
Yeah. And, oh my God, I lost my train of thought that quickly. Family. Yes. Okay. So family businesses, there's a level in family businesses. I'm not sure if you touched it with like consulting too, but the dynamics of a family business is very, very different. And when we share that we're brother and sister, so some of our clients are family businesses, and you can't just make a simple decision, right? That decision is so emotionally charged in the family. And those conversations are like something that HR would go nuts with in a normal organization, but how families kind of talk and, around a table. And that is something that like we've been able to really stress and be like, I get it. Like you have to talk with your cousin or your sister or your brother or your dad. And like that generational pull of like, this is a business decision, but it's also a family decision. It's totally different layered.
And I think
it's funny. If we had this conversation 6 months ago, I wouldn't be able to relate to it as much.
Yeah.
But one of the companies I am working with right now is a family business. And it has been a really wonderful, eye-opening experience because even those that aren't physically related, although there are some,
right,
have been there for 30 years. I spoke to one team member. She grew up down the street from one of the owners. So it's a really, really interesting dynamic. And I think you're right. And I think, talking about familial connections, talking about authenticity, I think the other really key dynamic that's going on, especially right now, is there's so much uncertainty.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think the more that we can create authentic connections and feel familiar and feel the comforts of home, pardon the ism, and the comforts of family and making sure that things are relatable, people are going to be, I think, that much more responsive to it because there is so much uncertainty right now.
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the word relatable, right? Because I think a lot of these bigger brands that are trying to make themselves look smaller, more people can relate to that versus the huge brand. It's that thing that if you can just bridge that connection between you and your customer, it can change everything. So I think it's truly one of the most important things to really kind of dive into and make sure that you're checking that box.
Yeah.
Well, and the way to do that is staying in constant connection with your community.
Yeah.
Building out that community, having ongoing dialogue, and then reinvesting those learnings back into the way that you're positioning your brand is absolutely critical.
Right.
That's how you stay close, right? Is they'll tell you, your customers will tell you what they want.
100%.
They'll tell you what they like. They tell you what you don't like. Those brands that lean into that and reinvest those learnings, those are the ones that are winning.
Yeah.
100%.
So, you have this amazing background in these large organizations. You're now bringing that experience into consulting. Who are you looking to work alongside in the next chapter of your career?
Oh, that's such a good question. Everyone. I have one of the things I've been very fortunate about is I've had a lot of variety in my career. So in addition to working in multiple industries, I've worked in a lot of different roles even within those industries. And I've always found that, and it goes a little bit back to what you were talking about, Alicia, how, yes, I may have studied something. I was an English major, but I think what it taught me was the ability to make connections, whether they were connections with the way that I think about ideas or connections with people or something broader than that. And I think I try not to pigeonhole myself too much into any one path, because I found when I'm a little bit more open and it's more about sort of core competencies of who I'm working with, That's more important to me. I like organizations that are willing to take risks, but calculated risks. It's really important to me. In fact, it's probably most important to me on who's on the team. I like to work with people I like and respect and that I can learn from and that can learn from me. Ideas come from anywhere. It's a theme we talked about earlier. And I think the more that I continue to grow and learn from my experience, that's what energizes me more than anything else. It's less about sitting in a certain box and more about having some of those core competencies that attract me to a company or a project or a team that I'm working with.
That's awesome. And where can people connect with you and follow you after this podcast?
Sure. So they can certainly look me up on LinkedIn, Jennifer Musillo Evans. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. Feel free to DM me and we can connect directly.
Awesome. I cannot thank you enough for this amazing conversation. We could talk for hours about all of this.
You look at the time, it's like, oh man, I could at least go another half hour. So.
I know. I could just keep talking and asking. I can't wait for the next conversation. We'll definitely have you back on the show. Maybe the whole show will be about what the heck we name it. But we could dig into some other good stuff. But thank you so much for coming. Hit it off with the closing. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Jen, thank you so much for joining us. I think there was a ton of good, nuggets to kind of take away from this. I think that's kind of one of the most important things to us is that, obviously we're not professional podcasters, but we're hoping that you take away something from this, right? Maybe it's just a little this thing of like, get to earn your clients more, listen to your team, regardless of their title. Yeah. So like all these little nuggets, hopefully you guys take something away and just kind of put it to use. So, But Jen, I wanted to thank you so much for your time. This has honestly been a pleasure. Crazy to learn that you live right where we actually grew up, almost the next town over. So it's amazing when you kind of start really talking with people. Again, and another example in regards to showing like when you get to know somebody, you make that connection, right? Yeah. But again, Jen, thank you so much. Really appreciate you for joining us on the show. And I'm sure we'll be catching up at some point in time.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It was lovely to spend time together. I really appreciate it.